let's cut through the partisan spin about how Colorado ended up with a budget crisis.
The fat is trimmed. I imagine that we will see worse cuts next year.
We're in northwest Colorado, where firefighters are confident they'll hold the line and save a town. Motorcyclists have a new legal way to get around traffic, yet stats show most aren't using it.
It really depends on the situation. I do sometimes, and sometimes I don't.
That's tonight on Next.
Colorado's current budget crisis is the fault of Democrats at the state capitol if you ask Republicans, and it's the fault of Republicans in Washington if you ask Democrats. Or, if you would prefer to be honest, both parties contributed to this mess in very different ways. Our Marshall Zellinger explains.
Colorado went from expecting to refund $289 million in Tabor dollars to having to cut $783 million. Who's to blame? In April, state lawmakers passed a budget that started in July and had the revenue and expenses even. Then, at the start of July, the Republican-led Congress made tax policy changes that President Trump signed into law that will drop the revenue coming into the state. So now the state has to do a combination of cutting expenses, finding new revenue, or using the piggy bank. That's what the special session is about. However, there's already a problem in next year's budget that starts next July. That budget is already expected to be $532 million short, and the warnings existed before the Republicans in Congress passed a new budget bill, like when state lawmakers debated the current budget in April.
You know, I think next year we're really heading for a big wreck.
We better do more than rip off the Band-Aid, because otherwise next year we're going to need a tourniquet to stop the bleeding.
I appreciate that sentiment, and I do think we will be in a world of hurt next year.
The fat is trimmed. I imagine that we will see worse cuts next year. Next year, it's going to be things that really upset people because there won't be any fat.
Next year, the state starts $532 million short if everything costs the same next year as it does this year. But that's not how budgets work. When you account for Medicaid increases, higher education costs, employees' salaries going up, and building maintenance, the state is projected to be $1.4 billion short. And because of Tabor, Colorado can only keep and spend so much each year. So if costs go up faster than the Tabor limit, cuts have to happen. Then it becomes a state policy problem. What should be funded and what programs should be cut?
Colorado lawmakers already knew before Congress acted that next year was rough. And the state was already projected to spend as much as it could, plus refund money back through Tabor next year. So it becomes a spending question. Does the state spend too much, Republican viewpoint, or is Tabor too limiting, Democratic viewpoint?
And at some point, they have to stop fighting with each other about it and actually come up with the cuts. What are most likely?
Well, that list I just showed, I don't think you're really going to do much with the Medicaid spending, but employee salaries, I hate to say it, you might be limiting there. Maintenance, you're probably not going to spend $200 million on building maintenance next year. That's money that's going to be held back. So, but you got to find a lot of that.
All right, Marshall Zellinger, thank you. A county seat in Colorado is on the edge of an evacuation tonight with a wildfire burning outside town. Meeker, in far northwest Colorado, Rio Blanco County, has watched the Lee fire creep closer this week. Today, though, there is more confidence that town will not burn. I want you to take a look at exactly where the fire has been burning southwest of Meeker. This is the Lee fire that jumped Highway 13 yesterday, moved left to right across your screen. There's a bit of a natural fire break. Look at all that green. That's the White River, the basin there, along with it some irrigated ranch land and a small golf course. That is between the fire and Meeker, population about 2,500. Our Corey Reppenhagen is up there. And Corey, tell us about the source of this confidence that you're hearing from firefighters that Meeker is going to be protected.
Yeah, you know, Kyle, it was one of those things where I just had to come out here and actually see the lay of the land for myself to understand why the firefighters were pretty confident that they were going to be able to keep the fire out of the town of Meeker. Now, put yourself in this situation yesterday when the Lee fire made that huge run, consuming more than 20,000 acres, and most of which happened in about an 8-hour period. And so that fire made such a run. It jumped a highway, like you said, came down this ridge back behind me, and ended up only 2 miles from town. So at that point, the knee-jerk reaction would have been just, hey, let's evacuate this entire town. And given the circumstances at the time, no one would have thought differently. But it turns out the firefighters had a little bit more information at their hands than those of us on the outside looking in were aware of.
It is very close, but when you have people understanding the fire behavior, they know the likelihood of it being able to go through irrigated fields isn't real high.
And so it turns out the south side of Meeker is actually very green. There are several ranch properties with green alfalfa and hay growing in there. And there's also the White River Basin and that 9-hole golf course that you mentioned. I'm told that the fire stopped just short of the 4th green. So it would take a huge wall of embers to really get through that property, and the wind, the conditions for the weather were just not really there. So you really got to hand it to the Rio Blanco Sheriff and the fire commanders on this incident for utilizing that scientific information and making a call that at this point seems to have worked out for the town of Meeker. Kyle?
Yeah, they got that great assist from nature. They knew what they were working with. And as you said, Corey, it really does make all the difference when you can get up there and show us what we're talking about. It's so scary to hear about a town the size of Meeker being threatened. Thank you for your work all day on this. Colorado can't seem to keep its firefighting aircraft in the fight this summer. As wildfires burn on the western slope in a number of places, the state's 2 multi-mission aircraft have been out of service for a week. Those are the planes that scout conditions up above. They provide guidance to firefighters. One of the planes had a nose gear malfunction August 1st while landing in Grand Junction. Today, we learned that after that emergency, the state grounded both of the planes until they could inspect the nose gear and replace some parts. One of the planes will be back in service tomorrow after more than a week on the ground. The other is out indefinitely. A couple weeks ago, we told you about how the state's much hyped Firehawk helicopter was out for more than 2 weeks for required maintenance during the fire season, missing in action as those small fires got bigger out west. Let's talk to 9 News meteorologist Chris Bianchi about the fire danger, which is also linked to the heat that we have been seeing. It was a hot day here in Denver, Chris.
Exactly right, Kyle. That heat plus that wind. It's not common that July and August are such big fire danger months because these are typically our 2 least windy months of the year. July and August are. So we get red flag warnings, fire weather warnings for us across the mountains. This is not the time of year we usually expect them. We actually expect them more in the fall, in the spring, and unfortunately we're seeing them now because it's been so dry and hot. Still got that fire weather warning in place through tomorrow. Now, in Denver today, 99 degrees. Today will likely end up as our 2nd hottest day in Denver on record. And you're probably going to go, we've been hotter than 99. You'd be exactly right. Here's how to contextualize it. Our low temperature since midnight, 74 degrees. That's Midwest stuff. That's Texas stuff. Low temperature is 74. That's not common for us here in Denver. If that holds through midnight, which looks likely, this would be our warmest low since 1881 for us in Denver. And if you average the high and the low, which is the best way, in my opinion, to measure the day's warmth, it would be, well, not only our warmest low since 1881, this would also end up as our warmest, 2nd hottest day on record. You average that high and that low, it'd be our 2nd hottest temperature on record for us in terms of that average daytime temp, about 86.5 for us in Denver. Air quality alert still in place for us here in the high country, and tomorrow, 97 for us. Tomorrow will be our 5th day at or above, 5th consecutive day at or above 97 for us in Denver. We've only done that 11 other times on record, so it's the longevity of this heat that really stands out, and that low temperature today as well. 7-day forecast, much needed cool down Saturday and Sunday.
Crispy forecast from Crispy Donkey. Denver will have more cool kids in school this year thanks to the air conditioning project funded by voters last November. 2 more DPS buildings will have AC when the kids come back in a couple of weeks. That bond measure included $240 million to install air conditioning at the remaining 29 schools with zero chill. So that's 2 down, 27 schools to go. Many of those hot schools will require several years of work.
It's very difficult because all the schools, depending on the age of the building and what the structure is of the ceiling and all that, the design is really critical. So none of them are the same. They're all different.
DPS says they plan to get 6 more schools hooked up with AC next summer. Many of us are guilty of taking work home, but when you're a retired police detective, that can be a crime. A retired Aurora police detective is now under criminal investigation for hiding dozens of case files in a crawl space at his house. APD says a cold case detective noticed files missing from the 1970s. They called a retired detective who had worked them, and he brought in a bag full of information. Whoops! So police searched his house and found 30 more boxes and bags, documents and videos stuffed in a crawl space. APD says this is 11 old cases. They're making sure all the evidence was properly disclosed during prosecution. The retired detective is not facing any charges yet, and APD says they have changed their storage system and they're modernizing their record keeping.
There's been a lot of positives and negatives with it.
Our producer Marilyn loves to say, sun's out, hogs are out. New numbers show motorcyclists are divided on lane splitting and testing which flowers are best for roofs. No, really, this is very real and it is very next. A year ago today, motorcyclists in Colorado got the green light to start slipping through gridlock traffic. Yet stats show riders are hesitant to do that lane filtering. Our Evan Krugel set out to learn why.
Few things test your temper or your engine like roasting in summer gridlock. So Jim Wilson understands the envy drivers must feel as he cruises between them on his motorcycle.
Hot day, it's almost 100 degrees out, and yeah, I took advantage of the law and I filtered through traffic to the front of the lights.
Today marks 1 year since lane filtering became legal in Colorado, allowing motorcyclists to drive through stopped traffic at a slow speed if it's safe to do so.
In those situations, it's definitely helping them out. They're able to filter through traffic. They're not getting stuck in a position where they might get hit from behind.
But even Jim, a motorcycle instructor, has been choosing his spots carefully.
It really depends on the situation. I do sometimes and sometimes I don't.
And Jim isn't alone. In a recent survey from CDOT, only 29% of motorcyclists say they actually engage in lane filtering.
I can see where an inexperienced motorcyclist or maybe somebody that's very cautious doesn't feel the need to do it. There is risk doing it.
And even a year in, Jim says some motorcyclists still seem confused by what's allowed.
When traffic's moving, motorcyclists are splitting traffic while traffic's moving, and that is not legal in Colorado.
He believes more riders will eventually begin to filter once it becomes more accepted by drivers, but says following the law will be key to getting everyone on board.
You know, we're all sharing the road.
Now that law remains in a bit of a probationary period. CDOT is currently putting together a study to see if this is having positive impacts on motorcycle safety. The state legislature will then get to look at that study and they'll have to decide in 2027 whether or not to make this law permanent in Colorado. Kyle?
I mean, at the end of the day, you just want predictability, right? Like, you want the people on the bikes to kind of behave predictably. Like, as a car driver, I want to be predictable to them. I don't want to put them in danger. But when you have that uncertainty, that's tough.
And that's such a big part of this is drivers are still getting used to this. I'll admit I'm still a little shocked when I see one cruise by me in traffic. And then you have those motorcyclists who aren't obeying the law in the right way. Jim says that's a big problem here. Drivers won't be on board on this and truly recognize this until motorcyclists are truly obeying that law.
Well, education's a big part of the process, so I appreciate you talking about it. Evan Krugel, thank you. Minimum wage workers in Denver will see a smaller pay bump next year than they did the past 2 years as they push up on $20 per hour. Starting January 1st, minimum wage will increase from $18.81 an hour to $19.29 an hour. That's about $40,000 a year for somebody who works 40 hours a week. It's a 2.5% increase, down from 2.8% this year and 5.8% in 2024. The calculation is based on the percentage change of the consumer price index of workers that year. For tipped workers, Denver's minimum wage is up to $16.27 an hour. A law addressing Colorado's environmental inequities is working on a new project to zoom in on one community. The law passed last year directs the state health department to conduct an analysis in Colorado to better understand how environmental factors impact people's health, their well-being. So the state is accepting applications from whole communities, anywhere in the state, this includes tribal lands. In order for the community to be picked for study, they'll have to meet the state's definition of disproportionately impacted by environmental factors. It could also include things like the percentage of low-income families who live there.
This will be the first time we're really trying to get the big picture and to be able to hear what community members are telling us about what their overall experience is as someone living in that community.
The nomination window closes tomorrow, and then the state's going to pick another whole community to study in 2 years.
I think we can have beautiful, functional, and provide resources for pollinators all at once.
Flowers are blooming in unexpected places, like atop rooftops in Denver. Hey, a reminder, you can catch Next streaming each night, 6 p.m. on 9 News Plus. And if you like the show but hate my facial hair, you can now just listen to our podcast. Usually, you have to look down and around to see Colorado's wildflowers. Look up, though, to the roof of the CSU Spur building in Denver, and you will see more up there. It's an experiment to find out which flowers will bring pollinators into the city.
There really is nothing more graceful and artistic than seeing a large blossom that's just saturated with color in the middle of a place that you would least expect it. We are on the Colorado State University Spur campus, one of 2 green roofs on the 3-building campus. The big deal with the wildflowers is that in just 2 months' time, we can go from seed to beautiful blooms and provide resources for our pollinators. My graduate student and collaborators at the Denver Botanic Gardens and I are looking to try to find sort of the minimum amount of seed we can put out to garner the most benefits for both the pollinators and all the other resources, like we can sequester carbon, we can manage stormwater, and we can help cool our environment by adding plants. So here's the wonderful thing. This is a little bit of heaven on a place that's normally ignored. I mean, if you look at downtown Denver, there's over 5,000 acres of eligible rooftops. Even if we just greened a few more of those rooftops, imagine how many resources we could have in our urban areas. As long as we just curate the way that we install these, I think we can have beautiful, functional, and provide resources for pollinators all at once.
We're back with your feedback next. The most Colorado thing we saw today, somebody getting up and close and personal with some wild decor. A bear spotted standing tall in a truck bed in Pagosa Springs. Former bear, we should say, stuffed bear. If you note, there's somebody there in the truck bed holding on to the thing. Boy, could you imagine if that came tumbling out of the truck bed onto a car behind it. You think lane splitting is dangerous. Wait till an 8-foot bear topples onto your windshield. If you see something that reminds you of Colorado, email it to next@9news.com or text next 303-871-1491. Chuck writes, you seem like a smart guy. I wonder why you would grow a beard during the hottest time of the year. Chuck, because I had to sneak it in when I was on my vacation. It was my only opportunity to do so. Renee says, still rocking the beard, forget the facial hair haters. I don't know, Renee. They could hold me down and shear me like a sheep at any moment. We'll see you next time.